Underground exploration offers the ultimate escape from the surface world, but sometimes that escape becomes permanent. Cave mortality data reveals that 78% of underground deaths occur within 200 feet of safety, often in passages cavers had successfully navigated before. International rescue organizations document an average cave fatality rate of 4.2 deaths per 100,000 participants annually. From a solo diver who found an air pocket and spent his final hours carving goodbye messages while carbon dioxide slowly poisoned him, to a medical student whose body became so wedged that rescuers had to abandon him and seal the entire cave system, to a group of friends whose illegal body recovery mission turned into a documentary about choosing between loyalty and survival. But first, the explorer whose 14-day ordeal created the world's first media circus, complete with carnival vendors selling food to tourists watching him die. These weren't random tragedies. They were moments when the underground claimed its price for trespassing. January 30th, 1925. The rolling hills of Kentucky held many secrets beneath their limestone surface. Floyd Collins, a legendary cave explorer and entrepreneur, set out alone that cold winter morning to find a new entrance to the Mammoth Cave system. His mission wasn't just exploration, it was business. His own Crystal Cave struggled to compete with the more popular Mammoth Cave for tourist dollars. A connection between them could change everything. Collins was no amateur. He'd spent years mapping the underground labyrinths of Kentucky. But that day, inside the treacherous sand cave, experience wasn't enough. 55 feet underground, a 27-pound limestone slab broke free from the ceiling, pinning his left leg in a narrow passage. Every struggle only wedged him deeper. The first rescuer arrived 6 hours later. What followed became America's first media spectacle. Thousands of tourists and reporters flocked to the site as rescuers battled unstable ground and tight spaces. Vendors sold food and souvenirs, while the National Guard controlled the crowds. For 14 agonizing days, Collins remained trapped as a parallel rescue shaft was dug. But a cave-in severed contact, and he died of exposure and starvation just days before rescuers could reach him. In death, Floyd became an attraction himself. His body later displayed in a glass coffin inside Crystal Cave for paying tourists. His story proved that experience means nothing when nature decides to collect its due. And it showed how easily tragedy transforms into entertainment. 84 years later, another caver would suffer a similar fate. November the 24th, 2009, Thanksgiving week in Utah. John Edward Jones, a 26-year-old medical student, husband and father, entered Nutty Putty Cave with his brothers and friends. It was a family tradition, a cave he'd explored since childhood. Deep inside, Jones mistook an unmapped fissure for a known passage called the Birth Canal. He crawled headfirst into the space, just 10 inches wide and 18 inches tall. As the passage narrowed, he kept pushing forward until he became wedged upside down at a 70-degree angle, 125 feet underground. With his arms pinned against his sides, blood pooling in his head, and breathing increasingly difficult, Jones remained conscious and communicative through much of the 27-hour rescue operation. 137 rescuers worked tirelessly, briefly freeing him with a pulley system. He spoke to his wife via radio. A moment of hope shattered when the pulley anchor failed in soft rock, dropping him back into the crevice. After more than a day trapped upside down, Jones died of cardiac arrest from prolonged inversion. The rescue had failed, and officials made an unprecedented decision. The cave would become his permanent tomb. Nutty Putty Cave was sealed with concrete, with Jones's body still inside. His death showed that even familiar places can become death traps, and sometimes rescue is impossible, even with unlimited resources. Across the world in South Africa, the crystal-clear waters of Sterkfontein Caves hold another tragic tale. On March 15, 1984, Peter Verhulst, an experienced but reckless diver, entered the underwater maze system alone, a cardinal violation of diving safety protocols. Deep inside the complex network, Verhulst became disoriented. His movements stirred up silt clouds, reducing visibility to near zero. With his air supply dwindling and panic setting in, he found a small air pocket, temporary salvation. But as hours passed, Verhulst realized rescue wasn't coming. The air pocket, his refuge, was becoming his coffin as carbon dioxide levels rose in the confined space. He stripped off his diving gear and, finding a slate, began scratching final messages, his last communication with the world he would never see again. Days later, rescue divers discovered his body and the slate bearing his goodbye messages. He had died of CO2 poisoning as his air pocket became toxic. Verhulst's death proved that solo diving is suicide with extra steps, and his final messages became a warning carved in stone. 2 decades later, another South African water-filled cave claimed 2 lives in a tragedy spanning 11 years. Boesmansgat, a 270-metre-deep sinkhole, first took Deon Dreyer in 1994, a young diver who pushed too deep, too fast. In 2004, master technical diver David Shaw discovered Dreyer's body during a record-breaking dive. He made a promise to Dreyer's family. He would bring their son home. On January 8, 2005, Shaw returned to fulfill that promise. At 270 meters, Shaw reached Dreyer's remains and managed to secure them in a recovery bag. But the bag became tangled in guidelines. Already suffering from nitrogen narcosis and high-pressure nervous syndrome, Shaw's judgment was impaired. Instead of aborting, he continued fighting with the tangled lines until respiratory failure claimed him. Days later, both bodies surfaced together. Shaw still attached to Dreyer, his mission completed in death. His helmet camera captured the entire tragedy. Shaw's death proved that promises can become death sentences, and even master divers have limits that water doesn't respect. In Norway's Plura Cave, friendship and loyalty created another devastating story. October 2014. 4 experienced Finnish technical divers, Kai Kankkonen, Patrick Grunkvist, Jari Huotarinen, and Jari Uusimäki, attempted to explore unmapped sections at 110 meters depth in near-freezing water. When Huotarinen became stuck in a narrow restriction, panic replaced protocol. Uusimäki attempted a rescue rather than seeking help, and both became trapped. The surviving divers faced an impossible choice: attempt rescue and likely die themselves, or save their own lives. They chose survival, making the agonizing hours-long decompression ascent while their friends remained below. When officials deemed recovery too dangerous, the survivors organized an illegal mission weeks later to retrieve their friends' bodies, a journey documented in the film Diving into the Unknown. This tragedy showed that sometimes saving yourself means abandoning others, and friendship can drive people to attempt the impossible. Thailand's Nam Talu Cave holds a story of survival amid devastating loss. December 27th, 2007. Despite rainy season warnings, 8 tourists and guides entered the cave. Among them were Helena Carroll and John Cullen, a young couple on vacation. When a sudden rainstorm triggered flash flooding inside, the group became trapped as water levels rose rapidly. Helena and John found a small ledge above the water, but it was too small for both. John made the ultimate sacrifice, swimming for help while Helena watched him get swept away by the current. For 16 hours, Helena remained alone in pitch darkness on that ledge, listening to the sounds of other tourists drowning around her. She was the sole survivor, rescued only when water levels finally receded. Carol's survival proved that sometimes love means sacrifice, and nature doesn't care about vacation schedules. Britain's deadliest caving disaster unfolded in Mossdale Caverns on June 24, 1967. 6 experienced cavers, Dave Adamson, Jeff Boiro, Bill Frakes, John Ogden, Michael Room, and Colin Vickers, entered the flood-prone system on what seemed a perfect day. An unpredicted rainstorm changed everything. The creek feeding the cave swelled rapidly, sending a wall of water through the narrow tunnels where the men were exploring. Trapped in crawl spaces too narrow to stand up in, all 6 drowned with no chance of escape. Recovery was deemed too dangerous, and their bodies were eventually buried inside the cave in what became known as a mud sanctuary. The site was sealed with rocks, becoming an underground cemetery. These 6 men learned that surface weather controls underground fate, and experience means nothing when a mountain decides to flood. 7 cavers, 7 systems, 7 fatal decisions that led to 7 preventable deaths. From the medical student who became part of the cave itself, sealed forever in concrete, to the diver who spent his final hours scratching goodbye messages on slate, these stories share a common thread. The underground doesn't forgive mistakes. The warning signs are not suggestions. The safety protocols are not guidelines. They are the difference between exploration and execution. The underground keeps perfect records. Every mistake is permanent, every wrong turn potentially final. Respect the darkness, or become part of it forever.